All right, we're back talking about mistakes that people make with their lifting gear, with their lifting equipment. In our last video in this series, in our first video in this series, we covered 7 mistakes. In this video, we're going to cover another 7 mistakes. I guess that would be numbers 8 through 14. So here we go. Number 8, the training log, specifically the error of not having a training log or not using one. Remember that a training log is one of the things that separates training from exercise. Training has a plan, it has a purpose, it has a goal, it has a program, and you keep track of that in here. If you're not keeping track of things, you're just exercising. Exercising is great, it's way better than nothing at all, but it's not training. Don't confuse the two. So a good rule of thumb when using a training log is every lift is going to have 4 components. This is one way to do it, all right? When you have a lift, you're going to have the name and the goal for the day, so kind of the prescription for the day. That's component number 1. Component number 2, you're going to record your warm-up sets. Component number 3, you're going to record your work sets. So maybe you squatted 135 pounds for 5 reps, 3 sets, right? 145 by 5 by 3, you write that down. And component number 4, you're going to write down what you're going to do next time. So I'm going to write down next 140 pounds. Number 9, wrist reps. Specifically this time with the error on wrist reps, we're talking about the error of wearing them too loose. So in this case, I'm wearing them in a pretty good spot. I'm not wearing them too low on the hand. It should be able to help provide some support for my wrist. The problem is I wore them too loose. I didn't really tighten the thing up. I didn't snug it up when I put it on. Remember, it should be tight enough, much like a belt, that you want to loosen it or you want to take the wrist strap off in between sets. So when you put the thing on, after about the first halfway around or the first one time around your wrist, you need to apply some tension to that thing so that when you've actually got it on, now it's actually helping provide some support to my wrist. Number 10, lifting shoes. Buy them, wear them, use them. The most important feature, don't get too focused on the heel. The heel is a very nice feature, it's useful. However, the most important feature is not the heel. The most important feature is the rigid, non-compressible sole. That's why a lifting shoe is so useful. It gives you a very firm platform on which to lift. If you're not going to lift in lifting shoes, and I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you're not going to lift in lifting shoes, at least don't wear something that's squishy as all get out like Chucks, and certainly for crying out loud, don't go barefoot. Yes, I know you were not born with lifting shoes, but you also weren't born with a barbell either. This isn't about being natural, this is about being efficient. Number 11, belt, specifically the use of a Velcro belt. Don't use a Velcro belt, there's a better option. There is a caveat, however, we'll get to that in a moment. What you want to use is a nice quality leather belt. We'll link to some options below. A leather belt gives you something sturdier, something that you can brace better against. A disadvantage to a Velcro belt is if you use it long enough, and those of you who have used them, you've had this experience, it will pop off on you at some moment. The Velcro will give at some moment. So use a leather belt, it's better for general training. Now the caveat is Olympic lifting. For cleans and especially snatches, the buckle on the belt and this loop right here can prevent an obstacle to that bar. If you do a nice job, especially on a snatch, on keeping that bar nice and close, the belt can actually get hung up on this. And this is one reason, this is a major reason why Olympic lifters will often need to use either a very, very thin leather belt or a Velcro belt. Number 12, the incorrect use of the basic metal spring clamp collar, what I think is the best collar in the world. I'm going to get some kickback on that, but we'll cover why in a moment. Now, of course, I'm not talking about a competition collar. These things are a pain in the butt. They're for use in competition, not for general training, because again, they're a pain in the butt. I'm also not talking about this type of collar here. Now these collars are fine. They're very popular, this style. However, it's a 2-part operation. That is kind of what makes them a pain in the butt, in my opinion. You've got to slide them on, and then you've got to clip the thing closed. It's of course very easy, it's very quick, but why deal with that 2-part operation when you can simply have a collar like this and slide it on like that and you're good to go. Now, where these get a bad rap is because people find them difficult, but that's because they're using them incorrectly. It has nothing to do with hand strength. First of all, specifically I'm talking about the spring clamp that has a little L shape to it, not the one that keeps going down and the handles get wider and wider and you gotta have kind of a big hand to use it. Don't get that style. You wanna get the style that has an L. And when people make a mistake, they're doing one of 2 things. The first mistake, the biggest mistake that they're making, is when you put the collar on, you have to make sure that it does not twist relative to the bar. So it can't turn this way or this way, it can't turn this way or this way, all right? You don't have to squeeze it very hard at all. We've got 8-year-olds that can put these collars on just fine. They don't have huge hands, their hands aren't incredibly strong, but they're just squeezing them a little bit, and then you simply make sure that it's not getting twisted on the bar relative to the bar as you're putting it on. Number 2, and this is a lesser thing, but if you're new to using this type of collar, it's almost always easier to pull the collar on than instead to push the collar on. When people push the collar on, you can still do it that way, but people tend to twist it just a little bit more. So your best bet is to simply, every single time you use a collar like this, squeeze it near the base, don't twist it, and then just pull the collar on, you're good to go. Number 13, chalk, specifically the error of not using chalk. Chalk is useful in all of the lifts, but especially the pulling lifts. So your deadlifts, your snatches, your cleans, even your rows, your chins, stuff like that. You don't need to go crazy with it, but make sure that you're using chalk. It's real useful, and unfortunately, you probably won't find out how useful until you miss a deadlift or until your back starts to round on the deadlift because your grip is compromised. Use chalk. Number 14, and our last error in this video, but we will be back in a future video with some more errors. We're talking about your training log again. Specifically, we're talking about something that is missing from your training log. Whether you have a coach or you are your own coach, you're going to have cues. You should have cues that you're going to be trying to be executing, whether it's knees out on the squat, or it's squeeze the chest up, or push the belly down between the thighs on the deadlift. The training log is an excellent place to do this, and this is one of the reasons why a written training log is usually better than a digital training log. Nothing wrong with a digital training log. You want to use Google Sheets or something like that, but most people are simply more likely to write themselves useful cues, useful notes on a training session in a paper and pen training log, or a paper and pencil training log as opposed to a digital one. Whatever the case, whether you're using a digital one or a paper one, make sure you're writing this stuff down so you're trying to make improvements from session to session. We'll see you in the next video in this series, and as always, we hope this helps you get stronger and live better.